is going on, all you wonderful A-plusers out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again to give you guys another Kamen Rider review. This time I'm actually going to be talking about the movie Kamen Rider Real X Time from Kamen Rider 01. Before I give my thoughts on the movie though, I do want to give my thoughts on Kamen Rider 01 first, because I haven't had a chance to review the show on this channel yet, and it's probably my favorite Kamen Rider series. Now, of course, as I've kind of mentioned several times, I haven't watched every Kamen Rider series yet. Currently, I believe in total I've seen Ryuki, Dragon Knight, X-Aid, 01, Kuga, and Forze, and then of course I'm keeping up with Kamen Rider Saber. And yeah, so out of all of them, I would probably say that 01 has been my favorite so far. It was the third Kamen Rider series that I watched, and just, you know, from its great characters to some of the really good messages I feel like the show definitely had for everyone, you know, it's really funny kind of looking back on it, because one of the things that you'll totally notice about it is how it kind of feels like what they were originally going for definitely changed during the whole during COVID-19, because there's a lot of it where it feels like the beginning of the show feels very much like it feels very much like the idea of us talking about how we have so much more advanced technology and it's integrating itself into our lives, and rather than fearing it, we should learn how to work alongside it. That's kind of what the first, I want to say half of 01, but it could have been a little longer than that, because I want to say it was towards episode 37 when the production shut down for a little bit due to COVID. But when it came back, it kind of felt like they completely decided to make a 180 and make it a very different message. The metaphor completely changed, and essentially it kind of became more about equality and treating people, even who are different, you know, with equal rights and all that kind of things. But it even got dark at times, because there were times where the company known as AIM, which they were basically kind of this you know, private military force that would take down human gears, which are the, you know, AIs that they use in Kamen Rider 01. Anyways, you'd see AIM being overly brutal to these AIs if they stepped out of line, and a lot of times you could, to me, it kind of felt like the writers were really reflecting on a lot of the police brutality that was going on in the real world, from China and America especially, but I'm sure other countries dealing with it just as bad as well. So, you know, I feel like Kamen Rider 01 was kind of the most relevant to the current times, but then again, I don't remember what it was like back in 2000 when I was watching Kuga, so for all I know, there could have been some really relevant themes about that season as well. But, you know, so for me, I think Kamen Rider 01 is definitely my favorite. And again, I do think that it really nailed it with its characters. I absolutely loved almost every single character from the show. Kamen Rider Thouser would still probably be the one exception, only because it just felt like the writers kind of just gave up on writing him and then just decided to completely change his character. And so they have him make a 180 just so he'll join the good guys, and it made zero sense. So I'd say Kamen Rider Thouser was the one character from Kamen Rider 01 I wasn't the biggest fan of. But overall, guys, 01 was an amazing series, so I definitely recommend checking it out. It is 45 episodes long. However, you know, for me, it didn't feel like 45 episodes, you know, partially because it's only 20 minutes each episode. So, you know, it feels like you could probably binge it in a couple weeks at the most, at least. Very great show, worth a watch. But guys, we're here to talk about the movie that just came out, Kamen Rider Real X Time. Now, this was teased at the very end of the Kamen Rider 01 series, because originally, from what I understand, this movie was supposed to come out in the middle of the show's production, but due to COVID delaying its release and its overall production, they decided to make a slight change and make it so it actually takes place after the end of the series. And I gotta be honest, I kind of prefer it that way. To me, I kind of like the idea of these events, these movies, not just with tokusatsus, but, you know, in animes, for example, as well. I kind of always prefer them when they take place after the show, because it gives us one more chance to really see what our characters are like now that they are fully developed, now that they have gone through all the previous things that they've had, all the previous struggles, essentially. And it's really cool to see what happens, you know, when a fully developed character that's gone through, you know, the biggest struggles now has to face another threat. See how they assess the situation this time, especially when it's only through the span of a movie length instead of an entire season. So I was really excited about the idea of this taking place after the show. So this kind of, to me, I went into watching this thinking this was kind of like a season finale in a way. Now, after watching it, I wouldn't really call it a season finale because the plot itself is a bit disconnected from the series in the sense where it's a very different threat. Now, it is related to Arc in a way. They do explain that this new threat is related to Arc, but it's definitely not Arc itself, and it's definitely a very different type of threat that they're dealing with now. Essentially, the main villain is trying to gas the entire world. I don't want to spoil too much about the plot, so I'll give you kind of a basic synopsis of it, and I highly recommend you guys watch it yourself. But the beginning is essentially this main villain. He's trying to gas this world with a very deadly poison, and he's trying to rebuild the world, as he says, in a utopia. And he has a lot of followers, these people in cloaks, and they all can transform into these really interesting looking Kamen Rider like henchmen looking kind of. They look a little robotic too. They look really cool to my opinion. My only problem is that you have a few leaders of each of these group of like kind of Kamen Rider android looking things, and the leaders of all those groups all just end up looking like the rest of the henchmen. So, you know, you kind of wonder why they even bother giving these people like, you know, bigger roles than the other henchmen in the movie. But at the same time, you know, we don't get much time with them, so it doesn't really matter too much. It's not like you really grow to attach to them as villains. They're really just on screen for a very slight amount of time, so it doesn't really matter too much. But, you know, at the same time, I really love the costume designs for these new Kamen Rider henchmen. I just kind of wish more effort was given into the leaders of them. But then we get our main villain, who is also, you know, able to transform into a Kamen Rider, and our movie starts with him basically fighting Aruto and kicking Aruto's ass and nearly killing him. In fact, there was like a weird moment where Aruto believes that he's in purgatory, and that's when he runs into the wife of the main villain, and you know, basically he finds out the main villain is doing this all for her, and so she wants him to put a stop to this. So when he returns to the real world to face him again, we get like a really interesting reveal about the villain that I personally didn't see coming. I kind of thought when it comes to movies for these type of events, it's usually easier to write a one-dimensional villain whose goal is to take over the world for no reason at all. In this particular case, he does have I don't want to say good reason. There's never justification for doing what he's doing, but at the same time, you totally see where he's coming from, and it's a very good, they do a good job with making him a very sympathetic villain, for sure. So, you know, I think they definitely nailed it with the villains in that sense. There's also a funny twist about the leaders of the overall, you know, henchmen that I don't want to give away, but I thought was hilarious. Another thing I gotta point out about this is that Izu is back, and she is probably my favorite thing in this movie. I think the arc they gave her is really amazing, and I think that a lot of Kamen Rider 01 fans are going to be very satisfied with it. Of course, a lot of the other characters return, but I wouldn't really say they have much of an arc, but they do definitely play a big part in the movie in trying to, you know, save the world. I'd say Aruto and Izu are the only two characters with an actual arc throughout the film, but that's totally fine. To me, I don't think when it comes to these movies, especially since all these characters have already been fully developed, I don't really think they all needed an arc or anything, but we do get to see them kicking a lot of ass, and it is so satisfying to watch. Speaking of kicking ass, I gotta talk about one of the biggest pros about this movie is the fight scenes. When it comes to the Kamen Rider movies, since I've actually been watching quite a few of them now, they get the fight scenes right. They get them down perfectly. Now, the show itself, of course, the show has great fight scenes, it's had them for quite a while, but the show is definitely, you can tell it's kind of limited on time. They're making, I want to say, like 1 or 2 episodes a week, very much like Power Rangers. So unfortunately, it lacks the time to really plan out the fight choreography and really go as balls to the wall as you could do with a movie. Whereas with the movies, you could definitely tell they have a lot more time to actually plan out the choreography and go through it. And therefore, it leads to some amazing stunts, some great camera work. There's one stunt in particular I have to throw a big shout out to in terms of, motorcycle stunts. It kind of felt like a very early episode of Kamen Rider Kuga when you had Kuga riding his motorcycle up a bunch of stairs while trying to take on the villain. It was like a mixture of that, but with the explosions from kind of the Disney era of Power Rangers. It was just so cool to watch, and the stunt motorcyclists that they got for that scene did absolutely amazing, and it's some of the best, like, I don't know what you would call it, bike foo or whatever. I don't know what you would call, like, fighting someone on a motorcycle using martial arts, and there's also a little bit of gun foo in there too, because she's constantly using her blaster as well. I actually thought that was really cool, and of course, at the very end, we do get to see all of our Kamen Riders teaming up together to fight alongside each other, and it is just so satisfying to watch. I mean, the one exception is Aruto and the new Kamen Rider 02, who I will not spoil who that is, because it is really awesome. But yeah, you get Aruto fighting the main villain while the rest of them kind of fight the rest of the henchmen together, and it's an absolutely beautifully choreographed fight. The villain, again, going back to the villain, I do really like his motivations, and I don't want to give too much away, but I'll say that if you like Dr. Freeze from Batman, and you like the book Ready Player 2 or the anime Sword Art Online, you're definitely going to like our main villain. That's all I'm going to say. Great performances all around. I think that all the actors, for the little times that they're on screen, they all do an amazing job altogether. Now I am going to talk about the one kind of con that I have with this movie. The one, I don't think the comedy was very good, but I also was never really a big fan of the comedy in Kamen Rider 01. I thought the comedy in 01 worked at times for me, but not all the time. Mostly with Aruto's like over energetic personality. There were times where I would enjoy it, but other times where it would just be really hard not to cringe. I think the one thing that would make me laugh about them would be like when Aruto would work on a really bad pun and Izu would be the one to point it out. It was always funny to me because as an American audience, I of course never understood these puns. They flew right over my head because I'm reading the subtitles. I'm not looking at the actual wordplay because I don't know the actual wordplay in Japanese. So it was always funny for me to have Izu pointed out, because you have Aruto getting pissed that she's destroyed the joke, because you never explain a joke. If you explain the joke is ruined. So that'd be like the joke, is that Aruto would be pissed off. But for me, as someone watching it, it's like, oh, cool. Now I understand what that reference was. You get a little bit of that, and I think that works. The part where the comedy gets weird is when you get like the kind of I can't remember their names, but they were kind of the comedic relief characters in Kamen Rider 01. They were the ones that would constantly, or maybe not constantly, but every once in a while trying to sabotage or try to take over as head of the company from Aruto, but would always fail. But here you got them, actually kind of, again, going back to the idea of them being fully developed with all the characters. So with them, they, respect Aruto a lot more, and they want to keep his vision of hidden intelligence alive. So they are interrogating a suspect, and there are times where it's kind of funny, but it's just really awkwardly done because they end up just stripping the dude naked and then just trying to torture him for information. And it was so awkward to see a scene like this played out in a kid show. One thing I thought was kind of funny is they did do the Austin Powers thing where there's always just some object conveniently placed right in front of the dude's crotch, except for at the the very end, and I have a hard time believing no one noticed this, because I noticed it right away. Towards the very end, you see the camera sliding away, and you could kind of see the dude's dick, because it doesn't do the best job at like hiding it in front of like another object, you know. So it was really weird, and I kind of wonder if they like just didn't want to do another take, or if they thought, no one's gonna notice. Well, joke's on them, because I noticed. But guys, overall, despite the awkward comedy at times, I did think this was a great movie and an amazing way to really give closure to Kamen Rider 01. Not that there wasn't closure before, but if you wanted like a little something extra, this is just that perfect icing on top of an already beautifully frosted cake. That is the best way to put this movie, and it was a really enjoyable film. Again, even if you haven't seen Kamen Rider 01, I think you'll get some enjoyment from it, but I would definitely recommend watching 01 first. But at the very least, I think anyone can agree that the fight scenes in this movie kick a lot of ass. But you know what, guys? At the end of the day, these are just my A+ opinions. We here at an A+ Opinions always want to know what you guys think, so definitely let me know in the comments below if you guys enjoyed this movie as much as I did, or if you didn't. I definitely want to know why, so definitely hit that like button, subscribe to our channel. But guys, above all, don't forget to keep it A+.